And then not to mention just him in general, you know, like being so deserving of all of this love and recognition for his presence and for his life. And I was feeling guilty for him being here. And it's as awful as that is for me to admit. But that's what it was. And this is not making me upset a little bit. Hello you guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie. I am a 27-year-old stay-at-home mom to my 2.5-year-old Maverick and my 3.5-week-old Kane. So I am recording a video today and I'm going to be talking about kind of the realness about how my transition has been from 1 to 2 kids. And I really wish that I had had time within the first or second week to sit down and record this, just because I had like really new and fresh and raw and real emotions going on that have kind of dwindled and just was able to transform in a way at this point. So I'm going to be talking about all of that, kind of just how the transition has been going, how it has gone from the beginning up until now. So let's talk about the initial feelings of seeing my 2 boys together. Because I kept saying, anybody who asked me, anybody who I talked to, that was like one of the main things on my mind before I had Kane was like, I'm not even fully prepared for the emotions that are going to be coursing through my body the second I see my boys together. And honestly, I could not have prepared myself for that at all, because I had never felt it before, at least not to that magnitude. And the only way I can describe it, the best way to describe it is overwhelming. And not overwhelming in a sense where I felt like it was too much to handle overwhelming, but it was just so much at once. I felt instantly, especially if you guys watched my newborn's first days video. If not, I'll put it in the iCards above. I actually have the full clip of my boys meeting for the first time. And if you guys saw, Maverick, my firstborn, did not really take too well at first, and it wasn't even because it had anything to do with his brother or even the situation. It was just he was kind of being pressured into paying a lot of attention to a baby who he had no idea and like no understanding of, like, wait, is this the baby that we knew of as baby Kane? And it was just being pressured on him and all eyes were on him, and he's not really into that kind of stuff. So once he had a minute to recoup and decide to approach it himself, it was a world of a difference. It just went so much smoother. And yeah, but being that it went that way at first, obviously my first initial reaction was a little bit of reluctance, I would say, because I had hoped that he would just initially be overjoyed, and I was a little bit fearful that when he didn't just offhand, you know, open up and be like really loving and just like really interested, I was definitely nervous that this was not going to be easy, that he wasn't going to take to his brother, which of course comes within time, but it was just like that initial fear. And then of course once he did open up and was just completely obsessed with him and wanted nothing else and wanted everybody to just acknowledge the baby that he was acknowledging now as baby Kane, was just so emotional. I was overjoyed in that moment, and I was so just in complete awe of life in general, because I was looking at my 2.5-year-old who has been my baby up until this point, who will always be my baby, but who has been my baby up until this point, where even though he's getting so big, he was still the littlest in my life, you know, to love. Then he's next to his little tiny brother who is fresh and brand new, and it was like a realization of how quickly time has gone and how much has happened. And it's a really bizarre transition to kind of like literally just relive in your head, like in that moment. And it was very emotional. So that was that. Coming home, the first week home, I had my husband here with me, my boy's father, and I'm so grateful that he was here, because I knew that my firstborn would need a little bit of time just to understand that, okay, like baby Kane has come home and he's not going anywhere. So I don't think I would have been able to bear that transition on my own for that first week especially. And honestly, by like day 3, Maverick did not wake up without asking, where is Kane? So he was understanding that he's here, and that was a really good thing. However, my firstborn also started to take more to my husband. And this is a really good thing. If you guys are stay-at-home parents, you know, especially from when your kids are little, your kids become greatly attached to you and you become greatly attached to them. And I've said that for a long time. I've been a stay-at-home mom for over a year, and Maverick has become my tiny best friend. I spend the most of my time with him every single day, and I have loved every second of that. So normally, and even especially towards the end of my pregnancy, even with my husband home, Maverick would gravitate towards me for everything. He wouldn't even accept much from my husband, and it was nothing against him. It was just he was used to going to me for most things, and me knowing, or him knowing, that I knew in what way he wanted certain things, and that satisfied him, so he would come to me. Whereas now I had to keep telling him to go to his father, go to his father, go to his father. I have to do this, you know, baby Kane, baby Kane, baby Kane. Where by like day 3 or 4, he was not so much used to, but he was choosing his father for things that he would normally come to me for. And as good as that is, because it's good for, you know, him to gain a better relationship with his father. Not that he doesn't have a good one, but you know, the dynamic between a working husband and a stay-at-home mom, there's obviously a little bit of that separation between father and children, because it's not the, you know, all the time parental unit, if you will. So I thought it was really good, actually. But in the same token, it hurt my heart a little bit, because all I knew was being the only, like the sole provider of his all-around kind of satisfaction. That's what I'm looking for. Like I felt like, and I think it was pretty obvious, that I did know how to satisfy all his wants and needs in the specific way that he wanted and needed them. And that feels really good as a mom. I think anybody can vouch for that, really. So for instance, one night in particular, I was sitting on, you were on my love seat, and then we have our bigger couch behind me here, and it's like a, you know, across from each other in the living room. And I was sitting on this love seat here, and Maverick had woken up from his nap. My husband was holding the baby, and Maverick, you know, I coaxed him, or I didn't coax him, I asked him to come and sit with me. He sat with me for a minute. He saw that daddy had the baby and went over there, and I even said to him, I was like, Maverick, you know, come sit with mommy. And he was like, no, daddy. And I lost it. Now, mind you, I'm gonna get into this now as well. This is also stemming from postpartum hormones, and definitely from baby blues. I experienced baby blues in my first pregnancy. I also experienced postpartum depression in my first pregnancy. I'll give you a little bit of information about that just for a quick second, because I think a lot of people do mistake one for the other. Baby blues, 90% of women experience baby blues after giving birth, and that is simply because your hormones go from being so regular to pregnancy to just like abruptly changing and, you know, like dropping off. All of these hormones that came with pregnancy are now just like quickly gone and going away, and your body is adjusting, and all of what goes on in your brain that, you know, triggers emotions and things, you honestly become, you could become, 90% of women become unable to control that. So a lot of the first thing you feel is sadness, and baby blues usually start to happen around day 3 or 4 after giving birth, and last about up to 2 weeks. And that's when they say, you know, if you're still feeling sad after that course of time, that's when you should be talking to a doctor, because baby blues should not last any longer than roughly 2 weeks postpartum. I experienced baby blues. A lot of this stemmed from guilt. So I'll start with night number 3, I think it was, being home. Or no, night number 2 being home. Because he was 3 days old. Night number 2 being home, I cried like a baby. The whole day I had been kind of like welling up, and I was trying to figure out like, what the heck, like why am I feeling so sad? I don't understand. Like, it was just something that needed to come out. And even I recognize that I'm not, you know, I'm very in tune with myself, and I knew that like, okay, I'm feeling this emotion, I have to let it out at some point. And of course throughout the day it was very hard to do that, because I was just trying to stay on top of now my new life and get used to things. And like I said, thankfully my husband was there. But by the end of the night I had spent a good like half hour. Now real quick, I have to add as well, I'm a breastfeeding mom currently, exclusively breastfeeding, trying to go for extended, at least up to a year. And with that comes a lot of sitting on the couch and holding baby. So dad doesn't really have much to do with newborns if you're a breastfeeding mom. There's not much that they can do for the baby when the baby needs to eat, which is very, very often. So I, for most of the day, had to push Maverick off onto my husband. I had to constantly deny him of, you know, playing. I couldn't roughhouse with him because obviously I'm in the early stages of recovering from a vaginal delivery, which you are, you know, bleeding and uncomfortable and in pain and whatever else. So there is not much that I could have done for my firstborn. So by the end of that night, it was like 7:30. We put my 2-year-old down to sleep around 8 o'clock, and it was around 7:30, and the baby was content. I handed him off to my husband. I said, let me go play with Maverick, and we sat in his room and we played cars and we had a blast. We were having so much fun. And within like 5 minutes of sitting there, I kept having to like choke back tears. And I didn't want to cry in front of Maverick, but I kept having to choke it back. And it was one of those things where I was just looking at Maverick and I started to feel guilty. I started to feel so guilty because I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking to myself like, okay, this is literally the only time that I have spent with Maverick today, when I normally spend all day, like every waking moment with him. Every one of his waking moments I'm spending with him. And this has been the only time now that I had the chance to spend with him. And I was like heartbroken. I felt really guilty. And even though we were having so much fun and he was so ecstatic to have like been spending time with me, I couldn't even look at him because I just felt guilty. And as soon as we were done playing, and my husband's routine is to get him ready for bed. That's just how it's been for us. My husband began to get him ready for bed, and I lost my absolute marbles. I was bawling uncontrollably. Could not stop. My husband is trying to like talk me off the ledge and, you know, reassuring me of all these things, and I just couldn't stop. And even in the midst of kind of realizing where I could have come down from that, I still couldn't stop crying. And that's where, you know, the hormones, that's the baby blues, where like you just cannot control that. However, my feelings were still very valid, and I still, for the next few days, I felt that little bit of guilt. You know, Maverick wasn't ready for this. I took too much away from him. You know, was this the right time? And then that led to the next day, day 4. Day 4 was the roughest for me emotionally. I cried all day long, and all it took was me looking at Maverick. So this is where it's so weird, the emotions that I went through and that you go through during postpartum. It really is. And for me, that whole day I cried. I couldn't look at Maverick longer than a second without getting upset, because I couldn't focus all of my attention on him. So that night, I had a worse night than the night prior. I was up in bed and just sobbing, and this is also, mind you, I was also very much sleep deprived. Kane was born at 1:14 in the morning, which you can imagine kind of throws off your sleep entirely, because you're giving birth in the middle of the night, you know, early hours in the morning. You're not getting a night's sleep. There's nothing, it's just completely out of whack. So the whole time since he had been born, now for the next 4 days, I hadn't gotten really any sleep at all. So I'm also sleep deprived on top of feeling all of these emotions and going through all these hormone changes and, you know, all that. So that night I'm up in the middle of the night and Kane is nursing, and I'm just bawling my eyes out in bed, because now, like I said, it's still like, these are just baby blues, it's hormones. I started crying initially to that, and then because I'm sad, I start thinking of reasons to be sad. And on top of now feeling guilty for Maverick, I started to feel guilty for Kane, because I'm looking down at this, you know, brand new little baby that's mine, and started feeling guilty now for him on top of it, because I sat there, I'm looking at him and his beauty and his perfection and like how blessed I am for him, and knowing that, and I'm thinking, and you for a second felt like maybe he shouldn't have been here now, you know, like how dare you. Like now I'm feeling guilty about the fact that, you know, I can look at my firstborn and say, wow, you know, like time really flies, and it's hard to think of how much time has gone by since Maverick was this little. And in thinking that, realizing that like this time does not last long, and I cannot and I should not, for the sake of, you know, this innocent child, feel any guilt for his presence, when his presence, especially in this state, is so short-lived and needs to be appreciated and needs to be taken advantage of, because I already saw how fast it went once, you know what I mean? And then not to mention just him in general, you know, like being so deserving of all of this love and recognition for his presence and for his life, and I was feeling guilty for him being here, and it's as awful as that is for me to admit, but that's what it was. And this is not making me upset a little bit. Initially it was just really hard to balance, you know, where does the love go? How do you share it? And really all of that just comes with time, and I've learned that, you know, it's definitely a transition, and it took a little bit for me to kind of step down from that. Thankfully, I can say that I have. Going from there, the next day, the following day, because my husband that night, I was in hysterics. I couldn't even talk. And the only words I got out to my husband, because he was begging me to like explain to him, what are you feeling? You know, I want to help you and I don't know what to do because you're just crying and not telling me anything. And the only words I got out was Google baby blues. And he did. And that's when he really stepped up after that too, and realizing like, you know, this is something that needs to be dealt with now before we get to a point where I was with my firstborn. So he was a really, really big help. Really big help. He still is to this day. But the next day, you know, like I said, when you feel those emotions, you really have to get them out. So the next day, being that it was unfortunate, I had to bawl my eyes out for hours that night, but I got those feelings out, and I needed that. And I needed to recognize where maybe some of the feelings were coming from on my end, and not just something that I couldn't control. What could I control to help, you know, veer these emotions away and just focus more on the positives, and focus more on just being, you know, head on with this transition, and just taking it as it comes, and not being so in my head about it. So the next day, I was still a little bit emotional for most of the day, but it wasn't even so much now sadness. It was, I would look at Maverick and get emotional, because I'm looking at how like big and smart he is, and realizing the time that has gone by, but realizing as well all of what's been so great in the time that's gone by. And especially now seeing him as a big brother, the greatness in that, especially because he's 2.5. He's terrible, okay? But as far as transitioning to living with a sibling and having to share time with me, he's just been really, he's doing really well. He's not perfect by any means, but he's doing really well. And I'm so appreciative of that, and I look at him and I love him so much more for that even, you know what I mean? So that whole next day I was still kind of a basket case, just because I was like falling so in love with both of my boys all over again. Basically, I was letting myself fall in love with Kane, and I was falling in love all over again with Maverick as like this brand new little person, basically taking on this new role in our lives and in his life. And it was just incredible. It was just incredible. So I could fast forward a little bit. Then the second week, we had a full week, full 7 days with my husband present at home. So the following Monday, my husband had to go back to work, and it was the first day of us all together. And you guys will have seen those vlogs already by now. A quick summary of day one. It was rough. The whole first week was like hit or miss. It was up and down. You know, like I said, my son is 2.5. He's a boy. He's a Tasmanian devil. He's nuts. And he definitely tested my limits. He definitely tested even his boundaries with his brother. But he's learning, you know, and I had a couple meltdowns the first week. We're now on the fourth week? No, this is now the fourth week. In total, this will be the third week that we're alone together. It is Monday when I'm recording this, by the way. So by the time you see this, this will be old. You know, the following, that whole week, and then even last week, it's definitely been trial and error. It's definitely been, you know, there's no predicting how each day is gonna go. But I do know that in all of this, it has become apparent that what is said is true. And, you know, one of my biggest fears in having more kids was, how am I going to love another child as much as I love Maverick? How is it possible that I can really share my heart with another child? And though I'm still learning, you know, how do I balance having to, you know, without feeling too much guilt, because time has to be taken away, and, you know, Maverick has to learn how to play independently, because I can't always be there and be playing with him. He's gonna have to be on his own so that I can, you know, restore order in the house, even if it's not just because I have to tend to his brother. It's all a learning process, but it's really true when they say that you have more kids, and it's not even that more room is made in your heart. It's not like any of the space in your heart that was taken by your firstborn is removed or even set aside. Your heart really just grows. And I am so in love with my boys. both of them equally in different ways, but so equally. Like, the extent of my love for them is just unmeasurable. And it's a really cool thing. It's a really, really cool thing, and it's definitely, I just feel so blessed to be able to have that much love in my heart, to have my two boys to love to the extent that I do. It's incredible. And like I said, you know, we're only on the 4th week of his life, and I'm still transitioning. I mean, the rest of our lives are going to be a transition no matter what, you know what I mean? Like, with every season of our life and their lives being their age difference and everything is going to be a season of transitioning and learning. And you know, that's kind of what I learned to look at as being like the fun of it, and not necessarily being afraid of it, because it's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. So aside from that, one other thing I really just wanted to note in this video to you guys is kind of going back for a second to talk about, you know, when I said having to kind of force now the first child to play independently. Because listen, I know, and I do it very often. I do it every day, at least once a day, where I put something off and say this can wait. However, I will tell you, for me personally, and I want to share this because I know I'm not the only person like this, I already have anxiety. One thing that makes me anxious is disorder. Is that what I'm looking for? Things being not in their order. You know what I'm trying to say? So like certain things, I mean, like I can't go all day just adding dishes to the sink and then have this big pile of dishes to do at night. Or, you know, there's certain things that I need to stay on top of in order to keep my head level. So yes, and I'm sure someone will disagree that I could wait for all of that till the very end of the night, and I shouldn't be pushing my firstborn into like having to play by himself because I want to do this and this and this. And it's could you call it selfish? I don't know. I'm trying to just keep order in the house as well, because when there is too much clutter and a huge lack of order in my house, that triggers my anxiety, and I don't want that to affect my parenting my kids. But anybody who has anxiety, you know, if you are feeling anxious, that 100% affects your mood and it affects your performance of just your daily activities. It causes me to become very frustrated at, you know, at the drop of a hat, and I don't want that to affect my parenting. So yes, if I need 10-15 minutes to do the dishes and wipe down the counters and maybe sweep the floor in the kitchen, to just be able to walk out of the kitchen to go play with my son and look back and just have like a sigh of relief that that is done, and now I can, you know, put some time with him, then I'm gonna do that. And I want everyone to know I don't see anything wrong in that, and I don't think anybody should see any wrong in that. I feel 100% that as long as it's not in a selfish way, and it's not like every single day and you're not like spending no time with, you know, your kids or what have you, then do those little things that you need to do to keep your head level so that you can perform your best as a parent to your kids, because I think that's really, really important. I've always stressed the importance of mental health. I think it's not really taboo anymore. It's very, you know, respected, in my opinion, to focus on your mental health, especially as a parent, because it's not just about you. I'm sorry if we shifted a little bit. My grocery delivery came and I had to stop recording. But yeah, so the last thing I want to add to this video is something that I know a lot of people ask, especially first-time parents, is was it easier transitioning from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2? And the answer for me, and this is going to differ for everybody, and I'll explain why. Like I said, we're still transitioning. It's still a learning process. But I can say off the bat, I feel that it has been easier to transition from 1 to 2 than from 0 to 1. My reasonings may differ to other people's, and everybody's I think will differ, because it honestly depends on the children as well. It doesn't even so much have to do with your experience. I can say that is one thing that is helpful. I feel like I am prepared. I was prepared, and I feel like I'm even like, you know, excelling at figuring out the needs and wants of my newborn, because I've been there, and you know, he's his own person, so things are different. His wants and his needs are different than, you know, Maverick's were as a newborn. However, I have a better understanding of how to approach things. I have a better understanding of how to cope with different things. I have a better understanding of how to have patience. You know, everything like that that comes with what you learn from your first is easily carried to your second, given that your second is an easier going baby. I'm trying to explain this the best way I can. So for me, Maverick as a newborn was a little tough because he did not want anybody but me. For the first 3.5 months before I went back to work full time, he wanted nobody but me, and that made my life really hard. He wasn't always easy to settle. He was very loud in whatever emotion he was expressing. He was always very loud, very vocal. We struggled with breastfeeding for the first 4 weeks of his life. There's a lot that comes with my answer to that question, because now Kane, on the other hand, is, besides the only noise that he makes is he grunts because he's still learning how to use his bowels correctly, and he grunts a lot due to that fact. But this child, he latched immediately coming out of the womb, and we've had no problems with breastfeeding to this day. Knock on whatever's closest, because dear Lord, we don't want another problem with that. He doesn't even really fuss ever. He'll cry when he's hungry, or when he just is sick of being in the same spot and wants to be moved, which I don't do often because I feel bad leaving him when he's awake like in one spot for too long. I'll just pick him up and walk him around. But he has made the transition easier because I'm dealing with a terrible toddler. God love him, but he's terrible. Not all the time, but he's terrible. But Kane is making it easy for me because he is just such an easygoing baby, and he's just been really good. So it's easy for me to say that the transition from 1 to 2 has been easier, saying that word a lot, than from 0 to 1, because from 0 to 1, everything was brand new. Your firstborn is always trial and error, and Maverick was not the easiest infant. So for those reasons, going from 1 to 2 has definitely made it easier. But that is it for this video. I'm gonna wrap this up. I have rambled on long enough. I had a feeling this was gonna be a lengthy one. I feel like all of my videos have been lengthy lately, and I really truly apologize. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much again for being part of this journey. I have loved being able to talk to you all and relate to you all and just have you guys kind of like in my corner throughout this whole thing. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you guys and all of the growth that this journey has brought to my channel as well. I'm really, really appreciative of. So if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Also, if you are new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you along for our brand new journey as a family of 4. And always, always, always remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. As usual, I hope you're all enjoying your day or your night, your afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are, and I will see you guys very soon in my next one. Bye!